Throughout the continental United States, there is a gathering of our automotive history. Most of you will not get to see or experience these icons of our youth, but I will, and I want to take you along with me on this wonderful journey. My name is Phil Maynard, and I invite you to come along with me. This is your time to connect with your automotive past. Classics, customs, instant classics, restorations, sports cars and motorcycles. Anything that rolls down the interstate highway and back roads of this great country is on display here. You can't make this stuff up. You can't generate this in a computer. These vehicles and people are real. The show will be centered at Motorland in Arundel, Maine. We'll feature and experience the eclectic Miles collection of fine custom, classic, and antique automobiles. Many people have experienced a love affair with cars, the same as I have, and that's what this series is all about. This series of 13 episodes will encompass a diversity of car models, years of the car, and how many produced, engine sizes, paint, and well, you name it, and this series has it. I would like to define the show a little more for you. It's not just a pretty car show. This show is not only going to center around custom, classic, and antique cars, but the people who own them. When did they get the car? And what it took to bring it to completion. For the last 5 years, we have been collecting the video necessary to bring you some of the most beautiful classic, custom, and antique automobiles we can find. People have been the center point of the series because whenever you talk about restored cars, you must put a face of a human being with it. Therefore, we have attempted to, and I believe succeeded, in presenting in this classic car series a well-rounded yet eclectic assemblage of fine automobiles. We love sharing these custom and classic automobiles with you and the unique stories behind each. The people and their stories of these unique and beautiful cars are preserving a precious part of our automotive history. Today we have a very special friend from Canada, and his name is
Dennis Gendron.
We're at the Miles Collector Car Museum in Arundel, Maine. So let's begin the interview with Dennis. I've been producing car shows for a little while, all in America. But I live in an area there are people come down here from Canada, but very seldom, if ever, will I actually interview somebody from Canada because they don't come down here with their cars, if they have them. So, I meet them, I talk to them, I enjoy the beach where I live. You guys come down there, Old Orchard Beach. But I'm very lucky. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to speak to somebody who number one has a car, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Number two is knowledgeable on cars and has great insight as to what a car is and what a car isn't. But anyway, getting back to Dennis, and Dennis, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us where you live.
My name is Dennis Gendron. I live in Laval, Quebec, and I had the good fortune of being invited. By the way, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to be on your program.
My pleasure.
I'm honored. I do have a deep passion for automobiles. I don't know if I'll ever cure from it. I don't know if I'll ever come out of it.
It's incurable.
I don't know if it's a pathology, but it seems to be growing with age. And sharing these few moments with you gave me the opportunity to express myself, and I want to thank you.
Well, you're very welcome, because, you know, this is an opportunity that I really don't have very often. I will meet people, and they know their car, but they don't know anything else, which is not bad. It might not be good for a program, but it's not good for me. So we're going to talk about a variety of cars. We're dealing with the Miles collection, and that's in back of us, and the audience can see some of the cars back there. So there are a couple of them I want to talk to you about, and we'll be doing rollovers over the top of these cars as we're talking about. One of which is, and I don't want to pull anything, the Cord. You want to talk about the Cord?
If you like.
I'd like to talk about the Cord. There's a beautiful burgundy Cord back there, and again, it's a part of Miles' collection. I know what was unusual about the Cord, but what are the things that are above and beyond what everybody knows about the Cord?
E.L. Cord produced the first quantity of front-wheel drive cars in America. He purchased his engines from Lycoming, who was in aeronautics. They produced an outstanding engine, very, very performing.
And still do.
And still do.
Yes.
And they had a very special electric transmission that was similar to what was used in the very expensive cars, believe it or not, in France. The Boulage and the Delay used a very similar electric transmission. And the car was a coffin. Well, the first series, of course, the 29s, when they first came out, were very, very high quality automobiles with severe drivetrain problems. By the second series, which were the coffin-nosed Cord, by that time most of the bugs had been worked out of the front-wheel drive unit. And the car was a favorite of special movie stars. For instance, I do believe it was Hopalong Cassidy who killed himself, believe it or not, because the car was so powerful. The car would do over 100 miles an hour in the early 30s.
Wow. And Hopalong met he didn't fall off of his horse. He fell out of a cord. Huh?
I believe.
Wow. Okay. Okay, so let's take another car that we've got behind us, and that's a Pontiac, that red Pontiac back there. Convertible. You seem to know a great deal about Pontiacs.
Well, I particularly like those vintage Pontiacs because they're the last of the old straight-eight engines. Ken Hannibal had designed that engine for Pontiac in 1933, the 6 and the 8. Produced an engine that was very, very reliable, economical, and quite powerful, and it was the lowest price in America. When we came to the 50s, by that time, most manufacturers and most direct competitor to Pontiacs had a V8. DeSoto had a V8. Right. Mercury, of course, had in 54 the new overhead valve V8. DeSoto had a V8. Almost everybody had a V8. And the ones that didn't hurt themselves severely, we're talking about Hudson and Packard and Nash. But those old Pontiacs can give you the straight-eight feeling and sound that a lot of people who are nostalgic about the feeling of an old car can still find with the 53 and 54 Pontiacs.
Well, I had an opportunity to go for a ride in that particular Pontiac. That would be one of the cars that I wouldn't mind taking on a trip. But yet, you know, we all own, or the majority of us own, more modern cars. We'd have difficulty in that car after the first 50, 60 miles.
But it grows with time. Yeah. I personally own 3 of these Pontiacs. I have 2 54s and a 53. And I do go on trips, I would say, Phil, under 100 miles. You're quite comfortable. After that, we're spoiled.
you realize that that was the type of car that appeared on I Love Lucy. When Lucy and Desi were moving to California, moving the show from supposedly the New York brownstone thing to Copacabana or whatever,
I've seen
and
that.
they were moving.
California, here I come. Right back.
1953 was a good year. Desi and Lucy, along with Ethel and Fred, moved their show I Love Lucy to Los Angeles.
Don't be late. That's why I can only play. Open, go, California, here I come.
We had,
Was it
but it
54?
was 54, and I think this is what, a 55?
53.
53, I'm sorry, you're right. So just the year difference, that type of thing, but there were a number of differences on the car.
Yes, but don't forget that the 55, as in most cars in America, the 55 were years ahead of the late 53 and 54. The mid-50 cars were leftovers from the post-war era.
Yeah.
When we reached 55, we went into better electrical, high compression, short stroke, overhead valve engines. And so the cars were quite different. But that old Pontiac really feels like an old car. It's still got old type suspension, no ball joints, still the old kingpin
Yep.
suspension.
Yep.
So you really
Steering.
get the feeling of the
Yep.
old car.
Steering is a trick.
Steering is a trick. You got it. You got it.
Especially if you don't have the skinny tires.
Of course, of
If you
course.
put the radials on there,
Oh,
you better have a good upper
you better.
body control. Yeah.
You're right. You're right.
As I said, I've been for a ride in that thing, and it's really cool, but I wouldn't want to do the winding road.
No,
Interstate highway maybe.
it can be an experience.
Yes, it is.
Can be an experience.
But it's a beautiful, beautiful car.
I agree.
Now, I want to move on to another car, and you and I have had this discussion, had an opportunity to talk about some of these cars prior to going on tape. Now, we have a 55 Chevrolet convertible back there. Everybody, I think, has heard everything they
About
ever
the
wanted to
55
know
Chevy.
about a 55 Chevy, but I want to take it one step further. 55 was beautiful, convertible, those were nice. But what I want to bring up with you, because you have extensive knowledge of this stuff, is they had a 1954 Chevrolet
Yes.
body design. They had a 1955 body design. 56, it changed body design. 57, changed body design. 58, body design, change. 59, body design, change. Now, I know how these cars are made, and most of the audience sitting out there probably does also. How could they afford to buy the stamps that car needed to be built with? The wings, the trunk,
The re-dyes every year.
every year. Now that had to cost millions of dollars, but you gave me a reason when we were sitting back there
Well,
on why they were able to do that, and I'd like you to share that with these people, because this is one of those little untold stories that people probably scratch their heads and say, well, I don't know. So go ahead.
well, that's a very interesting question, and I'll tell you why. That is the basic fundamentals of the economy of scale that has made the big might of America. Mass producing those Chevrolets has allowed General Motors to be able to redesign the old theory of the genius of General Motors after General Motors was put together by Mr. Durant, and he had his problems with the stocks. But the genius of Alfred Sloan, Alfred Sloan created annual obsolescence so that you would have a new car and you put it in your driveway, and your driver's one-year-old car would be obsolete.
Yeah.
And nowhere is it more obvious that this was brought into being as in the mid-50s Chevrolets, as you pointed out. Because by that time, General Motors was so proud to say that Chevrolet alone was 25% of the total U.S. production in automobiles. So they could afford to redesign these cars and create new dies to modify them annually. And if you notice, they couldn't afford to do that with their other brands. But with Chevy, for instance, in 1955, there was over 1.5 million Chevrolets produced. There were stamping plants in California, in New Jersey, in Michigan. I believe there was 11 or 14 stamping plants for Chevrolet alone in the year 1955.
So that's why they were able to make the complete redesign. I can imagine, and again, maybe I can't imagine. Can you see the guys at the tables that are designing these things? And they'd have to be, what, 2 years, a year ahead? Just even to be able to make the dies.
Well, I'm not an expert at giving you a good answer on that, but I do believe the studios were hardworking. And of course, Chevrolet had the biggest studio, naturally. And Chevrolet, don't forget, for many years wanted to be a baby Cadillac. And if you look at a 41 Chevy and you look at a 41 Cadillac, you can see that it's a baby Cadillac.
Right.
But it really went on its own in the mid-50s when you're talking about the new Bel Air convertibles, and it set a new trend, and I guess the rest is history.
Right. Okay, so we've been through the Chevrolet, and I appreciate that. And I know these people out there did not have that concept of it, and now they're going to have something to sit around the table and talk to with their friends. Here's something else. Now, we can't go away without talking about a Ford.
Yes.
Okay. You asked me an interesting question before we started shooting, and that is if I had my choice of whatever kind of car I ever wanted or I could have, what would I have? And I told you I would want a stone, stock, perfect condition,
32 Ford.
32 Ford, 5-window.
5-window coupe.
And
Well, I remember, I'm old enough, and I
No,
doubt
you're
that
not.
many,
Come on now,
I
stop.
doubt that many of our viewers are, but are you familiar with the Andy Rooney movies?
oh yeah, absolutely.
Mickey Rooney drove
Mickey
a
Rooney.
32 Ford convertible. And old man Henry sure knew what he was doing when he was supplying Andy Rooney with
As
that.
a
Mickey
college.
Rooney with that. That was the first true hot rod look.
Yep.
Was a 32
Right.
Ford.
Right.
And of course, didn't hurt that Henry Ford was smart enough to come out with a V8 for the masses.
Oh yeah.
And that made the whole difference
Oh,
because
yeah.
everybody else was still making.
Well, let's face it. Had heater, windshield wiper. You could start it from inside.
Yes.
Mama had something comfortable to sit on,
Yes.
out of the weather. Didn't have air conditioning, but they didn't need air conditioning. They had air conditioning with the two windows that went down. But that was a car that was designed for Dad to use, but for Mom to say, you can get one.
It was an easy car to do anything.
Yes,
for.
it was.
You could fix it. It was easy to drive. It was economical.
Right.
It was reliable. It lasted forever. It was really an icon of the car industry.
Right. Now, let's, unfortunately, we don't have one back there, but you asked me the question, and I thought that information that you had on it was really
But
important.
it's a car that's changed the whole mosaic of the automobile industry
Yes.
when it came out.
Absolutely.
And as an aficionado, it's natural that you would be interested in such
Sure.
a car.
Sure. Okay, now, General Motors again. You have Chevrolet, Tell me if my order is correct here. You have Chevrolet, you have Buick, or Pontiac,
Pontiac,
and then Buick,
Oldsmobile.
Oldsmobile, and then Buick.
Actually, let me be a little
You
bit
do.
of a,
You do.
a bit of a.
Okay, you do.
You had Chevrolet.
Yeah.
Pontiac actually was the sister car to Oakland. The next car up was Oldsmobile. It had its sister car called the Viking. Buick was the second car up, but it had its sister car called the Marquette.
Okay.
And Cadillac had the LaSalle.
Okay.
They all had the multiplicity of brand.
Yep.
They tried it. It was a disaster. Oakland was the only one that remained, but the sister car outsold the Oakland, so the Pontiac remained and the Oakland disappeared. But General Motors created, again, the genius of Alfred Sloan, created for a line of automobiles and with a hierarchy so that no matter where you were in the status of your standard of living, they had a product for you. You know, one interesting thing about this hierarchy that we're talking about, in my memory of having read many, many books about General Motors, that hierarchy was challenged once. Harlow Curtis, when he was president of Buick, in 1941, was reprimanded at the tower of General Motors, because we all know that General Motors all had divisions. But Harlow Curtis was brought back to the tower, which was the tribunal and the head office, and got a few slaps on the wrist for having upstaged Cadillac. If you know about a 41 Buick Limited, you know that it's more luxurious than a 41 Cadillac. If you know about a 41 Buick Roadmaster, you know that it's got 165 horsepower. The maximum horsepower you could get out of a Cadillac in 41 was 150. Obviously, that didn't happen again ever in 1942 or 1943.
Okay, we have right in back of us, you haven't had a chance to take a really close look at it, but we have a bunch of Woodies.
Yes.
Now, we have a Buick Woody right here. And again, you haven't had a chance to take that much of a look at it. Who would have that Buick Woody? Who do you think would go down to the dealer and say, I would like to have a Buick Woody? That's what a special is.
I think, let's face it, the origin of the Woodies, they weren't called station wagons for nothing first.
Yeah.
Because they were used to pick up people at the train station.
Yeah.
So obviously, people who would buy a Woody would own more than one automobile, and more often than not, would own more than one home. And the Woodies were used a lot as the summer car at the summer estate. You'll notice I'm not saying cottage.
Right.
Because the people that were well off used to keep a car at the estate for summer.
Right. That was the car that whoever took care of the grounds, that type of thing, and would come to pick
you up
at the station.
Exactly.
He showed up in that car.
Yes.
And he got the place cleaned up for you, and he got the groceries in the icebox.
Got it.
He did all of that stuff before you got there, but he needed transportation, and that was his transportation.
And he had the time to maintain the wood on that car.
Yeah, that's true.
That needed to be taken care of because they did rot. And especially when they were used and were kept in they had to be kept in a very dry area. They aged well, and you know, it was the only car in the lineup of a product line that was more expensive than the convertible.
Oh, wow. I didn't know Well, I would imagine. I have a little story on that, and I don't know if it's true. I can't seem to get all of the facts on it. And maybe you can help me with this. Woodies came about primarily during some hard times for the boating industry.
Yes.
There were people down in like New Jersey that built this boat called a canal cruiser, all wood, and beautiful joinery and everything. It was narrow. That's why it was called a canal cruiser, because it could get up and down canals. But it had a Kennedy handle. You saw him sitting on the back of that thing. That was a canal cruiser. Okay, so anyway, they were very popular with rich people. Well, when rich people don't buy, what do? They're not going to go, you know. So, those people needed work, and they saw the possibility of getting the car to a certain point without doors, without this, without that, basically to the top. And showed Henry one, showed him around, built him up, showed him around. And if you look at the Woodies, especially the early Ford ones, you'll see that all of the joinery is just exactly like they did on boats. And that was only done, that wasn't done with cabinet makers, that was done by boat people. The ribs that run down,
Were they cedar?
I don't know, you know, but whatever, but they, the ribs on the roof.
It did. I've seen.
Yes,
I've seen there's no doubt there's a similarity in the
the
workmanship.
covering of the roof on the early ones were straight off of the covering that you would find on the tops of
Phil,
canal cruisers.
Phil, if I may interject, you're,
Sure.
you're very, obviously very knowledgeable. No,
well,
seriously. But as we know, the manufacturers of these woody wagons often had them contracted out.
Yes,
They never made that in-house.
right.
And I do believe they were contracted out to people who were related to boating.
Well, again, if you look at old boats, the joinery on those boats, it's almost impossible. You'll break the wood before you break the joinery. Yeah, it's beautiful. And again, Woodies have come a long way, and I'm going to say the last 10 years as far as value is concerned. We've had a couple of people in here that have looked at these Woodies that we have in here, and then you go outside and take a look at theirs. I mean, it's beautiful. So we're going to have a Woody show here, and I'd love you to come down and take a look at it.
If I can, I will.
Okay. So is there anything else out there that you saw that you would particularly like to talk about? We have a Packard.
We could talk about the 1954, if you like.
1954.
Yes,
Beautiful.
that's a popular car. Good story behind that car, that model. As you know, old man Henry didn't want any major changes to the cars that he was building when he was running the company. And so by 1948, believe it or not, Ford was still using a semi-elliptic suspension, which means leaf springs basically. And that belonged in the buggy, came from the buggy era.
Yes.
And Mr. Ford himself didn't want his son to move forward with regards to the re-engineering of the 46, 47, 48. By 47, he was gone. But and that got Ford into deep trouble financially. And so when Mr. Ford passed, engineers went very, very quickly to work, and they created the 1949 Ford, which was very, very ahead of the previous model, obviously with the new suspension and a completely new design. But because the company was strapped for cash, the car was produced way before the usual road testing that had to be done on a mass-produced product, or else the repercussions can be terribly expensive for the manufacturer. But the 49 came out and was a so-so car. But when the 1950 came out, Ford announced that they had corrected about 158 problems with the 49 discrepancies.
Yes.
And
I remember the word
discrepancies.
Yeah.
But by 1950, they really had a very, very fine product, and it gave Chevy quite a ride for its money.
You, and I didn't tell you this, but you know what my very first car was?
54.
A 54. It was black. It had a white interior, custom rolled and pleated. It had a Pontiac, when I bought it, it had a Pontiac engine in it and a 4-speed transmission.
Oh,
Yes. So my brother, service station time now, he says to me, well, you can't have it right now, we're going to do some things to it. So I said, okay. Well, probably about 4 days go by, and I hear the car coming and see it, and it pulls in, and my brother gets out. And he throws me the keys. He says, there you go. I'm a happy camper. I jump in that thing. I'm not very tall, so I can hardly see out of it, to be quite honest with you. So I get in, I turn the key. Gee, it doesn't sound like a Pontiac. And I look down, and there's a huge hole in the floor, and it's back to 3 on the tree. So I get out, pop the hood, and there's a flathead in there.
really?
And it was a small flathead. It was, what, 60 horse or something like that? So I go run in and say, what happened? He says, well, you know, if you were to take that car, you'd probably kill yourself. And because it's your turn, age-wise, to start taking Mom to the doctor, to take her to the grocery store, we don't want her riding in the hot rod. It'll go fast enough. That'll get you where you gotta go. And you'll look good when you get there. So I lost my Pontiac engine, my 4-speed transmission, but it did look good.
It did look good.
Oh, it did look good. But that was my very, very first car. I loved that car. What they called shoebox.
Yes,
That's
yes,
what
the
they call
shoebox
it.
Ford,
Yep.
50, 51,
Yep.
1949, 50.
Yep, yep.
You know, there's a car here that we should say a few words about. It's that 1941 New Yorker Woody wagon.
The Chrysler.
The Chrysler.
Yes.
You know, the Chrysler story is probably the least well-known of the three big makers. Everybody knows about Henry Ford.
Yeah.
Most people know about William Crapaud-Durand,
Sure.
who created GM when he bought Chevrolet from the Louis Chevrolet Racing Brothers, and et cetera, et cetera. He bought Buick from David Dunbar Buick. But Walter Percy Chrysler always gets the last, how should I put it, a space of time. And he was actually quite a genius at it. When he came out with his cars in 1926, he bought Maxwell, I think, in 1925.
Right.
But he came out with Chryslers in 1926, and right away, the cars were ahead of the competition. They instantly had hydraulic brakes. He invented, and his mechanics, of course, his engineers, invented floating power. This is the first engine built on rubber mounts. It would sound inconceivable that we would bolt a steel engine to a steel frame and not think of putting an insulator between the
Right.
two. But Walter Percy Chrysler thought about that. He had worked for Buick before. He had been a mechanical engineer as a young boy, self-trained. And when that 41 Chrysler came into being, Chrysler was making a very high quality product for the time. And when you said about your brothers that they sat at the table and they each defended their own fort, in other words, the brand
Yes.
that they
Yep,
drove,
yep.
You know, the old Uncle Harthers of this world drove Chryslers in those days.
My father was the one sitting at the table with the Chrysler.
And I didn't know, I mean,
Yeah.
we're not making this up.
No.
Because the cars were a little stodgy. They weren't as flashy as they didn't have Harley Earl as a designer
Right.
at Chrysler. And K.T. Keller was the president there. You know, his old principle was that the car has to be built so that the ladies can sit in the back seat with their hats on.
Yeah.
So it always created a different shape, but the cars were extraordinary quality.
The ride.
The ride.
The ride was what
The
my
ride.
father used to say. I'll get into the back seat of your Chevrolet with a drink in a martini glass, and he said, I won't take a drink, and before you get to me to where I'm going, it's empty.
Empty.
That's what he'd say. But he says, I can give you the entire bottle and the martini, and you'll drink the whole thing before you get to where I'm going.
He was very, very astute
Yeah.
because they were very, very solid, very good riding cars. And the history, in my opinion, and I'm fundamentally a General Motors fan, but I respect the Chrysler of that area tremendously.
Well, this particular one that we've got is called a barrel bank. It's a Woody. I have never seen another one like it. I don't think they built that many of them, and we're lucky
Was
enough
rare.
to have one.
It was rare.
And I mean, you can see it's just pure, the workmanship, the craftsmanship on that thing. You know, I told you earlier I was out of the fire truck industry, and the fire truck industry is very, very fit and finish. You know, it's got to fit perfect, and the finish has got to be great because a fire truck's supposed to last you 20 years. So, when you take a look at some of the cars that were being put out in that area, fit and finish wasn't that good. You could run a marble down the hood and fender line,
The tolerance.
and before it got halfway down, it was falling off over here. You know, it didn't follow the line. But I'll tell you, with that Chrysler right there, you can run a marble across any part of that thing. Perfect. And the wood is still perfect. We'll be taking a look at all this stuff. We're taking a look at it right now, actually, as I'm going over the top. Okay, well, listen, I'm going to hope that this is just the first of a series of discussions I have with you. We got a lot of tape here, and we're probably going to have to cut this up a few times, but that doesn't matter. I want to thank you for coming here.
Phil, I want to thank you.
I'm going to tell you.
I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Well, let me
Thank
tell
you very much.
I want to thank you for being a part of this industry, and the world is better because of you.
Thank you so much.
Because now there are probably a few thousand, maybe 100,000 more people out there that know stuff that's much younger than you and I. It's going to carry this information with them for the rest of their lives. And they will have something to talk about that's positive. That's the name of the game. You've said nothing but positive things in this whole discussion. Again,
Thank you again.
very much.
Thank you.
We want to thank Dennis for sharing his knowledge on classic automobiles. We look forward to his next visit and his sharing of more classic and custom information. Thank you, Dennis, and see you soon.